Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me tonight, our co-host, Bindu Nair. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Buford.
And our guest tonight is Eric, who is a former corrections officer with the Houston Jail, and we'll be talking to him. But first, Bindu's going to bring us up to date on some of the latest news of the week.
Yeah, thanks. Some of the hot and going topics of drug policy reform this week, the Supreme Court is hearing a case in which, in Juneau, Alaska, Frederick Morse and some of his friends during the 2002 Winter Games in Salt Lake City unfurled a banner, a 14-foot-long banner saying, "Bong hits for Jesus." And if you go to USA Today or CNN, all of these news media outlets have been covering this. This is a 5-year-old case where this kid has, insulted from defamation. He's suspended from school. The point is that they weren't on school property, and this was on private property where they held this banner. So it's hardly surprising that the ACLU and National Coalition Against Censorship is on Frederick's side, but now we're getting some surprising support from groups including the American Center for Law and Justice, which was founded by the Reverend Pat Robertson and the Christian Legal Society. So as we can see, this is completely turning to a free speech First Amendment case, and this has nothing to do with religion, which is what the prosecuting attorney and some people are trying to make this case out to be. The prosecuting attorney in this case is prosecuting attorney in Bill Clinton's impeachment case, Kenneth Starr. Students for Sensible Drug Policy was protesting on the Capitol Hill steps with banners that read "Free Speech for Students," because inevitably this would take away the free speech amendment rights that students have when they cross the school gate. In defense, they're using what the main idea is that one of Thomas Jefferson's quotes, "Free speech limited is free speech lost." And so we're hoping to see the outcome on this case pretty soon here.
There are 3 or 4 things that come to my mind about talking to this. And the first is the irony that Kenneth Starr in particular was incensed that this seemed to be a pro-drug message. Yet even the student who made the banner said that he really wasn't sure what "bong hits for Jesus" meant. He just saw it on a skateboard and thought it was funny. But, the 14th Amendment defines citizenship in this country. And it defines citizenship as beginning at birth and does not put any age limit on it. The Supreme Court has, on a couple of occasions at least, admitted that children have First Amendment rights just like adults. Now, way back in the early 1940s, Chief Justice in the current case said, "We expect schools to have a point of view. We expect students to start thinking." In a case in the early 1940s, the Supreme Court upheld a rule requiring all students to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And in it they said, "We make students go to school to learn how to be good citizens. We teach them how to do things that are right." The amazing thing is the court turned totally around on that case 2 years later, and in the middle of the Second World War, when patriotism was at the highest this country has ever seen, the court said you may not require a student to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And in one of the real earmarks of constitutional law, Justice Jackson said, "If there is anything that's a touchstone of our democracy, it's that no government official, no matter how high, may establish the correct thing for people to say or believe." And that includes school boards. They cannot tell a student, don't say bong hits for Jesus. They can't tell a student, it's wrong to say, I think drugs are cool. Now, they might try to convince him otherwise, but they can't tell him, don't say it. They may prevent disruptions in the classroom.
I think the student's defense attorney was quite on point when he said, this is unwise free speech, but we must tolerate it. Setting that kind of precedent where you...
How does he know it's unwise?
Well...
Who is he to make that judgment? I'm going to go further and say, it's not for any of us to argue whether the speech was unwise or not. We permit it, we argue with it, but we make no judgments that would suppress the speaker.
Right.
Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now, but unfortunately, when we get into free speech, it really does touch some of my hot buttons. So, okay, let's hear about New Mexico and Governor Richardson then.
Right. So, just congratulations to New Mexico becoming the 12th state medical marijuana state. Bill Richardson has fervently pushed for this type of legislation, and finally Congress and himself signed it into action this week. So, in his comments, Bill Richardson said that even though he may be a political candidate for the presidential elections of 2008, he doesn't feel it will affect his candidacy because he believes this is an issue that is just common sense. So hopefully we can have more governors and especially more politicians in Texas soon that will have this kind of stance and understand that it's a common sense ideal that wouldn't affect most of the population and would necessarily affect those that are terminally sick and dying.
I think Bill Richardson may have stepped over the line from being a politician to being a statesman here, in that he is an announced candidate for the presidency. This is a stance on his part that has the potential. I don't think it will actually have the effect, but it has the potential of hurting him politically. But he went ahead and did it because he felt like it was right for his state. And I think he deserves some congratulations.
I think he deserves a ton of congratulations for being the black sheep, if you will. But I mean, he's had support from his constituents. He's had support from his legislation. If anything, it's going to be the conservative states or states that haven't legalized medical marijuana that will
let's
be using
don't
this.
give too much kudos to his legislature. Remember, the House of Representatives in New Mexico voted the bill down, and it was only when Richardson convinced the Senate on the next to last day of the session to pass a slightly different and weaker bill, and then arm twisted it through the House on the last day of the session that this got through. But the bill was voted down the first time.
That's been voted down in past years, but he must have some support there.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is, his estimate is that something in the neighborhood of 150 people, or between 150 and 200 people, in New Mexico at most will take advantage of this bill. So he's not only risking his political reputation for a potentially unpopular position, but he's doing it to protect a very, very small minority of his people.
Right. So what is his motivation?
Because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
If you look at Bill's history as a public official, he's really, in many ways, one of the outstanding characters of our time. So, and there are also, other than Texas, still 4 or 5 other states that have medical marijuana on their legislative agenda this year. So a lot for us to watch as that goes on.
Right, and especially in Texas, we've been getting a lot of last-minute support that previously was unexpected, and a lot of politicians have been saying behind closed doors that if it gets to heard in a committee, if it gets heard at all, and it's a hearing, that they will be supportive of it. So
my own personal feeling is that we've really reached a tipping point nationwide on this issue. and it's going to move quicker now. Well, you found our guest for tonight, and I'm looking forward to what he has to say. So why don't you introduce him to us? But first, let me remind people that our phone lines are open. We welcome you to call in. We enjoy your comments and questions. They'll put the phone up on the screen, so phone number on the screen. So be sure and call us and let us know what you're thinking about what's going on. Now, who do we have with us tonight?
So tonight we have with us Eric B. He is willingly coming out here to speak about being a jailer at Houston jails. The Houston jails are notorious for being overcrowded and having the rough prison population percentage versus jailers. So we wanted to hear some of his perspective of what it was like in the Houston system. So thanks for being on here, Eric.
You're welcome.
Glad to have you with us. Now, were you working for what, the Houston City Jails? Or?
Houston City Jails. Was working 8200 McKiowa.
Okay.
Basically where they have the Class C misdemeanor for the males, and all the females who get arrested by the City of Houston Police Department, they go there.
Okay. And how long did you work?
Around a year.
About a year. And did you see some things there that surprised you?
Yeah, when you start working there, you have a total different perspective on after you've been there for a while. It changes you. After you see the same people coming in, you really get to see all the facets of society. You get to see the homeless population, because the homeless population comes in a lot. They come in to get a free meal. Some of them come in to get a free meal, take a shower, to get medical care. That's everything to them. Coming into the jail, as sad as it sounds, that's a big issue right there. That's a big problem with overcrowding, because, you see it downtown any given day, a homeless person just walk down the middle of the street. The police officers have to stop them and arrest them and take them over there, and they get processed in and they stay for a while. Mm-hmm. They get to sleep. They don't have to worry about their stuff getting stolen. And that just happens, in my opinion, too much, because they come in and they take up spots, and a lot of them want to fight when they come in. They want things to be done their certain way. They want to get extra food, get extra things like this. They want to leave with, jail equipment, blankets. Someone try to get extra food to take out with them when they leave, stuff like that.
Okay. Now, in the city jail, you're primarily dealing with people who have been arrested and have not been processed through the courts yet, are people that have things like traffic ticket fines that they've not paid or been able to pay. It's really very much a short custody and normally lower level offenders, isn't it?
Well, on the male side of McKiowa, but on the female side, we had a woman who threw a kid out the cars.
Really?
Yeah, the female side, you had murderers, drug offenses, and all that.
I would have thought they would have been booked in the county jail.
No, what happens is, if the city of Houston arrests them, they bring them over to our jail. They get processed into the city. Then they do what they call a county drag, and they take them from the city jail to the county jail.
Okay,
and it's typically a police officer that does that.
Yeah.
And it's like it goes on 3 times a day, at least 3 times a day, every day. So.
It's time for us to take our first break of the evening. When we come back, we're talking to Eric B., who served as a correctional officer in the Houston City Jails. So we'll be back in a minute or so.
This past Friday, Houston Normal and our roving reporters set up shop at the South by Southwest High Time Doobie Awards at the Red Rum Club. Besides the Lifetime Achievement Award to Willie, there were many awards given out, with the award being a custom-made bong trophy. We talked to director Ron Mann about his new movie, Tales of the Rat Fink, and asked some of the partygoers what they thought about the drug war. Here's what they had to say.
I guess mostly what we know you from is Grass the movie. You want to tell us a little bit about maybe some behind the scenes on that people may not know?
Well, it took 4 years to make. I mean, I spent a year researching. People came up to me and said, you know, when are you going to finish that movie? You're just having a good time just researching that film. And, you know, the most incredible thing about the research was going through Harry Anslinger's archive and how he kind of curated it for, you know, he wanted to, he was so concerned with his legacy. And so the thing about Grass is, you know, I think it spans Harry Anslinger's legacy.
All right, what really ticks you off about the drug war? The fact that there's people that I've known who have passed away in this world that live longer than they should have because they knew the right person to get the right drugs from, but yet we can't do that legally.
And how many hundreds of thousands of people in jail for smoking weed? That's stupid. That's hella stupid. Turn it around. Take the Netherlands as an example. People, take off your blinders. Look at what the Netherlands has done, how it's working.
When all was said and done, Austin was a better place by the time it was over. This is Steve Nolan for Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Okay, maybe a little of the money I spend on marijuana supports terror and violence.
Right.
And that's because marijuana is illegal.
Exactly.
When I buy a beer, that doesn't support terror because beer is legal, right?
Now you've got it.
So what you're saying is if we make marijuana legal and regulate it like beer, that wouldn't support violence.
Did I say that?
We're back. We're talking with Eric B., a former correction officer with the Houston City Jail. And Bindu, I believe you had some questions for Eric?
Right. During the break, we were talking about, and previously the reason why you wanted to be on the show is we were talking about situations of overcrowding, and you know, you said you specifically witnessed things like this, not only with the homeless population, but in certain instances. And could you, I guess, tell us a little bit more about that?
It's mainly on the weekends, but like working in the jails, especially if you work night shift, evening shift, it's like a lot of people come in because they have a lot of PI, public intoxications, people getting in fights at bars and clubs and like this. So these people are coming in there inebriated, they're either high, drunk, or whatever, very feisty. And you put them into the same jail and you don't have enough people to watch over them. In the housing section where you house people, a lot of nights when I work night shift, I will work with one other person, and it's, you know, one night we had over 300 guys in there. It was just me and another person watching over those 300 guys. And if something would have happened, which has happened a few times, where it's a big brawl or something, you have to run in and break it up, and it's not a lot of people.
Okay. You were talking about two of you there with 300 arrestees.
That's not a common basis, but that happens sometimes.
I was going to ask, what would be the normal ratio of staff to inmates? What do they recommend?
It's like on the housing floor, they recommend 3 people. You know, that's typical for 100 guys. And it's not, we're not supposed to have over 150 guys in both. We have a side 1 and a side 2.
Okay.
Typically not supposed to have over 150 guys.
Right.
You know, the max 200 guys. If you have more than that.
Yeah, but that's by Houston standards. Typically, that's like a 30 to 40 to 1 ratio. Yeah. And typically you're supposed to have, you know, a 20 to 1.
I'm thinking something else here, and this is that if you're putting 300 people in a space that should have 150, what does the fire marshal have to say about that? It looks to me like there's a real safety hazard there.
And this is something that a lot of the people who work in, a lot of officers and a lot of jailers and everything, they've all said, it's going to end up being the city of Houston is going to end up paying a lot for not creating more spaces, not opening, you know, they're trying to open up a new jail on West Side Command. But, you know, just to hold a few people they catch out here, but it's still not going to alleviate the problem because right now you have the rodeo. So you're dealing with at least 125 to 200 people every night coming in and going out because rodeo brings a lot of people get drunk.
Primarily public intoxication,
right.
Which brings up another question. When we're talking about nights where there are a lot of intoxicated people there, are you a certified peace officer?
Not certified, but I was working on it.
Okay, you were working toward it, but
and we have a number of them there.
Right. Part of the jailers are peace officers, and part of them are in effect civilian employees.
Yes.
And as someone who's not a peace officer, were you trained and equipped to handle public disturbances like a riot that might break out
Yes,
there?
we actually, before you can take the job, you have to go to training.
Okay.
And you have to pass pass the defensive course, and actually they give you a defense course and also a course on how to talk to people when it's a situation, because you don't want to just go in every situation.
That's what I was thinking. That
they're actually pretty good about that.
That's pretty much a tinderbox situation there, and I would think you'd want people that were pretty thoroughly trained handling it.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully they realize the situation that they have on their hands with all these, an inordinate amount of prisoners and only so many prisons.
The biggest problem with that is they're not taking people who really want, like police officers, peace officers. They're all peace officers. They're not taking people who want to be in the jail and leaving them in the jail. They're taking people off the streets, people who just graduated from their classes, people who want to be on the streets, making a difference on the streets. They're taking these people off the streets, putting them in a situation that they don't want to be in.
Right, so they don't even want to deal with it.
And then a lot of times they call in because they don't want to be in a jail, and it makes a worse situation for everyone who
when
shows up.
they get there, they've got an attitude while they're working.
And I'm not saying that it's the officers are bad. It's just that it's a lot of officers that want to be in the jails,
right?
And they force them back on the streets. And it's a lot of people who don't want to be in the jails, and they force them into the jails. And a lot of officers that I've talked to, especially some people, just say they're going to retire whether they go back on the streets because they want to be in the jails. That's what they're used to.
Well, really, when you look at it, they're really kind of two different professions.
Right.
I remember several years ago, and I don't know if they still do it, but Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office had a flat policy at that time that every new officer had to be in the jails for 3 years before he could work any other position in the sheriff's office. That doesn't necessarily strike me as the way to get the best. Jailers are the best police officers.
Exactly. I think Houston Police Department, we have to do 240 hours.
Yeah.
And, you have a lot of good officers that they pull off the street that, can't wait to get back on the streets.
Right.
But, in a way it does help out new officers because, you hear about people getting arrested for stuff they could have just got a regular traffic ticket for.
Right.
But if they worked in a jail, they know it's no use to taking this person to jail because he's not going to pay a dime. He's going to get all of his cases dismissed. If you arrest him on something that he could have just got a ticket for.
Yeah.
So you do learn a little bit of a lesson, but, like I was talking to a police officer who lives in our apartment the other day. He was saying, it makes no sense to take officers who want to be on the street off when you have more than enough. The typically older officers, they tend to be more patient. They know how to work with people in the jail system. It's like, the guys that I learned from, the older officers I learned from, if I was learning from a younger officer, we would have had a lot more confrontations. They taught us how to just talk to people, how to, spot a bad situation before it even got started, separate people and stuff like that. You learn a lot more from the people who have a lot of experience there than just changing out people every 10 months.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you brought up something I'd like to go back at. You said that with a number of homeless people coming in, they tended to have medical problems with all of the public intoxications that come in. What's the medical situation in the jail? How are medical problems handled?
It's priority. If you have a heart problem, every time that you say you need to go to the clinic, we'll take you. By law, you're supposed to take anybody who says they have a medical problem, but, it gets to the point to where some people, they know that little situation. They say, well, if I say I have a medical problem, I'm going to just keep saying I have a medical problem to go get extra food, because that's what people do, especially the homeless people. They'll say they come in there and say they have, they'll say they have hepatitis C or something. We're not going to test them there just to go to the clinic more, because the clinic people, they tend to have their own little food set aside. They get food, drinks.
Well, are there full-time medical personnel on staff in the jail?
You tend to have at least two doctors, 3 nurses on every shift, and a medical screener.
Yeah.
And the medical screener's job is when someone's being processed in, out in what we call the salad port, that's when you come through the doors.
Right.
You get processed in. they ask the person tends to have to be bilingual, Spanish and English, and if someone doesn't speak either one of those, we have to find somebody before that person can come in
That
jail.
was making me think, the way Houston is growing lately, there are enough people here speaking Chinese or Vietnamese or Arabic, but our old bilingual view of the city doesn't really fit anymore.
It was kind of weird. It was kind of actually funny at times when you had to find someone who spoke Chinese.
Yeah.
You had to actually find somebody, transfer the phone call out to them, and they have to translate, just as simple. Do you have any medical conditions or any medications? Have you ever tried to commit suicide and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And, that's how you classify prisoners. If they have HIV, they have to be separated from everyone. They have a communicable disease like hepatitis C, herpes, or something like that. We tend to keep them away from everyone.
That was my next question. You had mentioned hepatitis C, and I know that in prisons and jails, infectious diseases like HIV and hepatitis C are major problems. Do you have an adequate way to screen these people off from the general population in the first place, and then methods to take care of them?
The only way we have is if they say they have it or they don't say they have it. And
isn't there mandatory testing, though, as soon as you enter the jail? Whether it's, I'm not sure if it's city or county, but you get tested for HIV, hepatitis.
I think that's more if you get convicted of a crime. Once you go into prison, because where they can...
Where you're actually there long term.
And, they can actually order the test, because you can't order someone if they haven't been convicted of a crime, because, they still have rights.
Yeah. And not only that, most of them, assuming things work right, will probably be out the next morning, so there's no real time for testing.
Yeah, it's a little bit different on the female side. I don't really deal, males weren't really allowed to go on the female floor, but I did do a couple of courts, like where I take females to court, and I did have to work with the county pre-screener. And then, if they suspected someone had, like if it was someone who came in for prostitution and they were heavy on drugs or something like that, they might separate them anyway, just to be safe for everybody. Because, a lot of people don't, might have AIDS or HIV and never went to the doctor and don't know it. So, it was a little bit different on the female side than the male side.
Well, did you, as a jailer, take precautions to keep yourself from running the risk of being infected? I mean, you're dealing with and handling a lot of people on a quick basis here. What kind of risk were you at?
Well, we were at a lot of risk because, we've had a few occasions where people with HIV will come in and they will be bloodied. And, one guy came in, he had hepatitis C. He got beat up by some guys out in the jail, and we knew this guy had hep C. He had his medicine with him. And he came out and he wanted to fight. And he's swinging at people and stuff like this. And I remember one of the senior officers that was there, he was in a fight too, and the guy scratched him. And, for 2 weeks he was going around scared because the guy scratched him and he's bloody. It's been close to a year, so we know the guy has nothing now. But, scary. It's like, a lot of times we were supposed to always be supplied with gloves to search people with, but the budget for the police department, especially the jails, was so out of whack that we couldn't even afford gloves for jailers.
I'm just wondering, does the police union know about glove shortage?
Actually, they do, but it's nothing they can do until the budget is redone.
We need to take another break. When we come back, we'll continue talking to Eric about his experiences as a Houston City jailer.
The jury right to say not guilty is an essential safeguard against injustice, which dates back to English common law and the founding of the United States. Jurors in early 19th century America routinely refused to enforce the Alien and Sedition Act, and they rejected the Fugitive Slave Act. Jurors in early 20th century America refused to enforce alcohol prohibition. The injustices of the war on drugs have become obvious to many Americans. In cases where the law, prosecutorial excesses, and the likely sentence seem manifestly unfair, jury nullification ensures the citizen juror a more equal status with those who write the laws. Please visit the Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. Please keep such decisions private. Nullification is your right, your responsibility. perfectly legal and just.
You're watching Drugs, Crime, and Politics on Houston Media Source.
This week in drug war history, March 21st, 2003. President Bush announces his intention to nominate Karen P. Tandy to be the Drug Enforcement Agency's new administrator. March 22nd, 1972. The Richard Nixon appointed 13-member National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse recommends the decriminalization of marijuana and concludes, marijuana's relative potential for harm to the vast majority of individual users and its actual impact on society does not justify a social policy designed to seek out and firmly punish those who use it. March 23, 1983. Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush is placed in charge of the National Narcotics Border Interdiction System, which is supposed to staunch the drug flow over all U.S. borders. This is Steve Nolan for the Drug Truth Network.
Okay, we're back again talking to Eric B., a former Houston City jailer. He's been telling us, and one of the things just before the break, we were discussing things like budget shortfalls that led to a shortage of latex examination gloves for the officers. Did you have any other kinds of supply problems?
It was mainly that sometimes the medical supply would get a little low at times, but we tend to have, you can go to other, we had 2 city jails, so you could tend to go to other jails and get it. But like I said, we were only supposed to have enough, a certain amount of prisoners. So we have blankets and mats that we hand out every night before we go to sleep. Before they go to sleep. And
we have a caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, Buford. This is Dean.
Yes, Dean.
I was in traffic, missed the beginning of the show.
Okay.
I don't know if you discussed this thought, but my discussions with other jailers have indicated that the majority of the prisoners that are behind bars now are there either for drug possession or for a drug lifestyle. And I was wondering if I could get Eric, get his thoughts on that.
Okay, before he answers that, Dean, and before you go, I've been seeing some of your promotions for an event you've got coming up in the near future at the University of Houston. You want to tell us a little bit about that, and then I'll let Eric answer your question.
Well, thank you, Buford. Yes, it'll be April 10th. The Houston Community College Speakers Organization, the Pandora's Box, is putting together a panel at 12:30 p.m. This is at the Fry Road and Katy Freeway exit. And it's going to feature Stan Percy, who heads up the high-intensity drug trafficking area for Houston, Marcia Baker, who is the director of Phoenix House, the treatment center here in Houston. Also will feature Dr. Joel Hockman, who's head of the American Pain Doctors Association, and then yours truly. And we will be discussing the thought, are we winning the war on drugs? And if people would like to learn more about it, get directions, I've got maps and links to all of that at my website, which is drugtruth.net. And I also wanted to point out that this Friday on the Cultural Baggage Show, 7 o'clock, KPFT 90.1 FM, I'll be having a couple of guests on, and we'll be talking about prison rape. Basically, what happens to many of these nonviolent offenders when they get behind bars, either from the inmate on inmate rape or guards attacking the prisoners.
Okay.
And that's at 7 o'clock Friday, 90.1 FM.
Okay. Thank you for calling in, Dean, and we'll ask Eric your question. But first, I want to comment on something he said, and this is on prison rape. I know we've all been following the Texas Youth Commission stories about sexual abuse of the young people in custody there. But a recent study a few years back indicated that nationwide, looking at everything from local jails like where Eric worked through prisons, about 20% of the inmates were raped, many of them during their first week of incarceration. And if we look at prison populations as a whole, serious infectious diseases like HIV and hepatitis C, which can be spread by sexual contact, run as high as 30 or 40% in jail populations. So just a little plug for Dean. His show on prison rape could be a very serious and very important thing. But to go to his question, what effect did you see of drug lifestyle or drug use on the local jail population?
This is my estimate. I would say at least 60% of the people who came to especially my part of the jail, were on drugs. And we will make jokes about it a lot because we see the same people come in all the time, and it's like, we know this guy's a lot of times the officers, a lot of officers on the street are very jaded when it comes to drug crimes now. They're very jaded, and it's not their fault. It's the way the system is. It's like, Dean said, we went in a drug battle. I don't think so, because you talk to some officers on the street, if you arrest a guy, he goes to jail for 5 years, he comes back, he's doing the same thing again. You keep arresting this guy, you keep sending him to prison, and, they keep arresting him, but a lot of times guys will cop a plea, or I don't know what's happening. I've seen so many guys come in, we'll find 6 crack rocks on a guy, and, the charges don't stick because we found them on him in jail. And stuff like that. And it's kind of contrary to the way things happen on the streets, because in jail you get a jaded view of the drug life because you see everybody in there is on drugs.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I know the prisons in Texas are mostly filled with non-violent drug offenders, but when I see these people coming to jail, and a lot of the people coming to jail who are drug users are the violent ones, and the ones that are getting back out because officers on the streets are jaded. And it's like, it's a kind of a comment that people always said in jail. If a drug user really wants to get high, just go to a city jail trash can.
Right. That's one of the questions I was going to ask you. You see this is pretty prevalent in county jails and places where people are more long-term, that, they're being arrested for these drug convictions, and yet it's easier to get drugs in the jail itself. Did you see that in the city jail at all?
Well, not in the city jail, simply because people weren't there long enough to sneak drugs in. It really wasn't a use. And a lot of times, like, we'll catch drugs in a Sally Port, and there was always kind of a policy that, we catch drugs, we call a sergeant out, and the sergeant, they try to press charges and stuff like this, and, we don't see the person anymore. We don't know what happens to him. But a lot of times, before we get out there, an officer could be searching a guy. If he finds something, he doesn't want to do the paperwork. Like I said, a lot of officers are jaded when it comes to drug crimes. It's a big trash can right there. And like I said, if you really want to get high, go to a city jail trash can, because this is what happens. You'll see an officer with their hand like this, dump something in the trash can. We don't know what it is. We can't go searching for it. But I know for a fact that, it's not really the officer's fault that they don't want to do this. It's just that they know that once you get the people through the Sally Port, it's a lot harder in the city jail to get a conviction. For some reason, the DA doesn't seem to want to take any drug charges coming out of the jail, because I do know why, because they're supposed to be searched on the street.
Right.
And if they're not searched on the street, then the officer's going to get in trouble, and it makes a much bigger fiasco than it has to be.
You have to assume that if they're searched when they're brought in, if they're found with drugs in the jail, then someone brought them to them, and the someone would have to be a jailer. So
it's like, that's the reason why I had to think about that for a second while I was talking, and it's like, in fact, they told us, like, if you find drugs, it's going to probably be hard. I've seen it. I've seen guys get busted with, like I said, 6 crack rocks, and the guy, nothing happened to the guy. He sat there all night. We were trying to get the DA to take charges, and the DA never took the charges because he's like, how did he get all the way into the jail with the crack rocks? By that time, he's supposed to be searched on the street, searched on the Sally Port, then searched once you get processed in, and somehow he ended up in a back cell, and then we caught him later on, and they were sitting right in his front pocket. So it was like, how did that happen?
Wow.
And, you know, it's a lot of times that's just, you know, people work in a jail not doing their jobs, and that happens sometimes. And, you know, it's situations like that. We've caught people in the back already that had knives on them. And that's a very dangerous situation.
Yeah, and I can see where a crack rock might slip through in a seam of a pocket, but a knife's a little different story. Yeah.
So it's like...
Yeah. Well...
I wanted to, I'm going to interrupt here, I wanted to revisit the situation of overcrowding. You said that, you know, you see a lot of people, especially the homeless population. We had a guest in here maybe a few months ago, Mr. K, who had spent some time in and out of the Houston system, and he said that, you know, we see things like people sleeping on the ground, you know, too many people in a jail cell. Did you ever see anything like that while you were working there?
And sometimes on a nightly basis. Like, you know, we're only supposed to have a certain number of people. We only have a certain number of mats and blankets. We hand them out every night before people go to sleep. And what happened was...
those are mats to use for sleeping on the floor. They're not necessarily mattresses for a cot or something.
Yeah, it's just a mat. It's just for someone to lay on. You only have a certain number of bunks. And once the bunks are full, you know, people put the mats and blankets on the floor. You only had a certain number. That's the exact number that you're supposed to have in the prison. Once you get over that number, we have no more mats and blankets. We can't magically go get more. So people were literally sleeping on the floor, sleeping on benches and stuff like that. And, you know, and sometimes we'll get so many people in there, people's paperwork will get lost. And a simple PI, you're not supposed to be in jail more than 24 hours unless you plead not guilty and then you get held over for trial. I've seen people in there for a simple PI up to a week and a half. And, you know, they're doing a lot of time for something that the charge is supposed to be dismissed on, and, you know...
Right, that's just an overnight stay in the jail cell, sober up, and then kick you out again.
Yes, and what happens is you have so many people there that's coming in and out. And it's like so many people coming in and out that people get lost. And it's like a lot of times we visually have to look at somebody and say, you've been in, it's like, I remember, did you come back? And you have to say, oh, you've been here for a while. Pull this person over to the side, check their information, see if they were brought in on a PI. Like, let's say, for instance, a week ago, never been to court, nothing.
Oh, my gosh.
You go straight to your sergeant right there. You pull that person over to the side. You try to, you know, tell them that we've messed up. You just say, okay, we're going to see what's wrong with your case, and then we try to get them out as soon as possible.
Right. Because it seems to happen often. You said that people kind of slip through the cracks because of the overcrowding and because there's just so many people there, and you can't get through all the paperwork. Who actually does the paperwork? Is there a type of administration there, or?
Every jailer, every officer, you train on doing court returns, and then you train on a municipal court system. Everyone's trained on it, so it's like you go up and everybody has their own arrest number, what they're charged with, and everything's on paper and in the computer. But what tends to happen sometimes when you're doing stuff in court, you have 3 different shifts, and somebody could have called for someone and they're looking up their arrest information and just laid it on top of a computer, and that person's get lost, and it's like, everyone's trained to do something, so we're gonna look at the computer. It's nothing updated on the computer.
We need to go to break again. We'll be right back with Eric B. in just a minute or so.
I was trying to get us.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we have a problem, we only use one tool. It works pretty good most of the time, so we keep on using it. Pretty soon, when your only tool is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. With prisons overflowing with nonviolent drug offenders, it's time to try some new tools. Drug prohibitionists beat the drum for more jail time, but that has been a self-defeating policy. If someone has a problem with drugs, they need medical help, not incarceration. The drug war is doing more harm than good, and it's time for a change. By reducing the consequences of prohibition, we can deal with the real issues involved in a rational drug policy. There are better tools. If you would like to help reduce the harm caused by the drug war, please visit our website at dpft.org.
The word the only narcotic five words use of morphine or cocaine under the influence then become beast.
Yo, my name is Sammy C, and as you can see, the feds got me locked up in the penitentiary. I got a murder to my left and a rapist on my right, and all I did was toke on my peace pipe. America has since spent $25 billion locking up people who were trying to chill. They weren't trying to fight, they weren't trying to kill, but since 1937 they have totaled 17 mil. Now I don't need to tell y'all what's wrong with that when I did the same time with them violent cats. Look, I know almost half of y'all smoked a dime, so who knows how many of you could be doing time. And even then, after prison, tried to turn a new page. Well, I got news for you. You're earning minimum wage, because the feds won't approve your financial aid. So I don't know how you think you're getting college paid. Maybe you can join the army and get the GI Bill, but better not line up or your battle's uphill. But throw your butt out of the service dishonorably. All that fuss because you smoked a little THC. And if your grandma wants to hit for her chronic pain, then in most of America she's legally to blame. So come on, normal people, join me in this fight. We gotta do something now, because this mess ain't right. We gotta take it to D.C., tell Congress there. Stop arresting pot users, spending money elsewhere. Smoking pot is normal. What?
We're back with Eric B. again, but first we have another caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Thank you. I'm more concerned about those cracks than the crack. But I also just turned in, so I've only caught a little. Having new officers as jailers for the first 3 years is just plain wrong. But I know that there's been a lot of changes in jailers over the past couple of years, but I don't know where we stand today, if we're back where we used to be, or more importantly, what was learned. And wouldn't 24 hours of incarceration for new officers, of course in a segregated population, be very informative and educational?
That's an interesting suggestion. That's like every peace officer before he can take a taser has to be tased. What about shock 24 hours for you jailers?
I think that would actually help, because some people, the way people fall through the crack, it's like, when I worked night shift, most of the time I was working the housing floor, and I would give a speech before every night before you go to sleep. And I was one of the few people that would ask, if you've been here, you've been to court, your cases were dismissed or something, and you're still here, let me get your name, let me get your arrest number, and I'll look it up for you. You know, typically most of the people, they weren't supposed to be getting out. They had KPS once with someone else, or, you know, they had once out Pearland or Connell or something like that. But a few people, you find people. One night I found 32 people that were supposed to be out. And I got them all out that night. So, but the reason why, what the caller said, you know, one night, you know, it was a joke, but I was locked up in one of the back cells as a joke, because we had a control pod.
Yeah.
And, you know, the person who was working there was a friend of mine who always plays practical jokes. He locked me up in the back. And no one really knew about it. And I'm up there banging on the gate and stuff like this. And it does affect you once you're locked up like that. You're like, whoa. Because it's like, what if I was a prisoner here? And it's like, what could I do? I just have to stay here and listen to the way people talk. And it stinks so bad in there. And it's like, I have to smell this. And if I have to go to the restroom, it's very unsanitary. And it's like, what would I do? And it's like, a lot of officers wouldn't deal with that. And it's, like he said, the new officers never really know what it's like to work in a jail.
All I know from something else that he mentioned made me think of it, that anytime you're in an institutional setting, and I don't care if it's jailers and inmates, or whether it's high school principals and kids with funny signs, or whatever it is, but anytime that you've got a few people in charge of a mass of people with fewer powers, the tendency is to start thinking about them as other. They're not really people anymore. And I think probably the hardest thing to do in an institutional setting is to remember that, yeah, there may be a reason why those guys are in there. They may be a problem, but they're still people. And I don't know how you always make sure that custodians, and I'll include teachers in that, always remember that they're dealing with people. It's hard to do.
Right. It's that dehumanizing kind of sense when you have so many people. You know, we were talking earlier about you put people in jail for how they treat their animals if they keep them locked up in the car and overheated, whereas we see overcrowded prisoners with just a little bit of ventilation in the walls, and they're at 90, 100 degree temperatures in the summer and stuck in these jails.
Well, and actually it's the exact opposite. Where I work, they always complain about it being too cold. It's like
in Houston, that nearly makes it worth going to jail.
Because in the city jails, they have a policy that, you're going to have cooler temperatures and stuff like that. But for the most part, I would say the officers there, even the new ones, our sergeants were so in tune with what was going on in the back that we had to treat the prisoners.
That's great.
We had to. It's like, we couldn't just dismiss them because if someone complained to a sergeant, we were going to get in trouble.
Right. We have another caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, the crack on the wall, it needs to be fixed because I remember.
Can you turn the television down? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I'll have to ask you to try later. Thank you. Don't quite know what he was going for. Do you have a last comment that you'd like to make about what people should be aware of or what you think is important?
Well, I have a few things. If you go to jail, especially for traffic tickets or warrants or something like that, keep a receipt on you. Keep a receipt on you. If they don't give you one when you're leaving, go to the court and get a receipt from the court because the system right now is kind of screwed up and, it's keeping people's names as having warrants long after their warrants have been dismissed or whatever, or been taken care of. And if you don't have a receipt, you're going to go right back to jail. And I would like to say, even though it might not sound like it, in Houston we do have a bunch of really good officers out there. I've worked with a bunch of them, and it's like, unlike a lot of cities I've been, really good officers that really care about the city. So it's like, it's just the really good officers need to be on the street. The officers who want to make a difference on the street need to be on the street, and the officers who want to be in the jail need to be in the jail. That way you have a lot less disgruntled officers on the street and in the jail. And the system will go a lot faster, a lot easier, because you actually have people who care about things working in the jail, trying to help get the people who are falling through the cracks out of the cracks, and the people who really want to do something on the streets about, taking care of the real problems in the streets, the violent offenders and all that, because a lot of officers don't really think drug matters really matter anymore either. And if they're just following their rules, but it's like, get them out on the street, it's like things will be a lot better.
Okay. I nearly always end the program by urging people to write and call their representatives, their members of Congress. I think you've possibly added someone else they need to talk to. If the overcrowding and the budget problems are like you say they are in the jail, to the list of people that you call and write to, folks, include your city councilman and your mayor, because all of the problems don't come from Austin and Washington. And to end the evening, I have something to say again. I've been looking in some depth at the history of drug use and drug policy in this country. And I'm enough of a Darwinian that I believe that if behavior has been around long enough and widespread enough, it's probably got some benefit to it. We know that people, ever since there's been such thing as people all across the world, have gotten high one way or another. There's got to be some sort of survival benefit to that, especially when you look at the cost that can go along with it. And I was thinking, why has no one ever looked at the benefits of non-medical use of drugs? It struck me that for 150 years since it's been available, artists, particularly musicians and poets, have consistently claimed that marijuana helps their productivity. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but you don't hear any musician saying, I quit using pot because it hurt my music. It should be investigated. I know that about 90% of us regularly use caffeine because it makes us more alert. We think it makes us more productive. I know that 70 years worth of truck drivers have used amphetamines for the same reason. I know that the military still uses and has used amphetamines to make combat personnel more alert, more aggressive, and to be able to stay effective for longer periods of time. Now, these activities also have downsides, don't get me wrong. But we live in a society with hundreds of thousands of doctors, of psychiatrists, of psychologists, of sociologists, of even, okay, let's throw lawyers in. Why has no one on the research side of the world ever taken the time to do some serious study about, does marijuana really help a musician? Is the military right in giving its combat pilots amphetamines? And are we kidding ourselves when we drink gallons of coffee a day? You know, if we're going to research these issues, let's research all sides of it, not just the bad. Let's look and see if there's some good there too. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Do you have any last comments that you want to add before we go?
I think that's interesting. It's certainly a twist on what I thought your editorial was going to be.
Oh, really?
But it's certainly a fascinating point that marijuana and how it affects music. I know that studies have been done for ecstasy and depression.
More than depression, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Marijuana has also been used by the Israeli army to treat post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
yeah.
time to,
Exactly.
We have talked ourselves out of time once again, so I want to thank you for being with us tonight. I think you've contributed to a very good program. I know you've given us all a lot to think about. Thank you for getting up off your sick bed to join us for the evening. I hope you're feeling better. Thank all of you for joining us, and good night.
Policy of drug prohibition is hopeless. It is hopeless. It will never get better. Literally, victory today is being defined as slowing down the pace of defeat.
We ought to listen to science and medicine when it comes to whether marijuana or any other substance has a medical benefit.
The fact that marijuana is the less dangerous drug.
We're going full-blown into a program that has failed and failed every other time we tried it. Please point out one success in 30 years of an eradication program that has stopped drugs from coming in this country. Point out one success, because I reviewed that research years ago.